Fascism has become one of the most infamous and impactful ideologies within the current world. Almost everyone, within one way or another, learned of this ideology, either through standardized education or through their own personal research or just hearing about it. However, lately, one question that arose has become one huge point of contention within political discussion, primarily within the United States of America. This question is, what is fascism? We know what fascism is. It's fascism. But how do we determine that? How do we properly and effectively deduce this meaning? How do we know fascism? Through standard definition or Wikipedia, you might say. But if that was the case, we wouldn't be here in the first place. I would have never made this video, and this wouldn't even be a discussion at all. The question that we need to nowadays ask ourselves is, what's fascism? What makes fascism fascism? I am asking this question and making this video because this discussion is important. I understand that some people are either simply ignorant or scared to realize and question this topic, to go further, to delve furthermore into it. But it's one question that many people increasingly feel like we need to get to. A question that we need to question. The question which is, what's fascism? And I agree with this question. We need to ask ourselves this question more. What's fascism? No, seriously. Can you tell me what's fascism? And I want your actual definition. Because if we don't, we will be subjecting ourselves to reality that is dangerous. Because it allows exactly these types of people to be able to hide and go under the shadows. Would you be able to properly argue against fascism? You would say yes, naturally, as it seems incredibly easy to do so. But realistically, you would definitely freeze. You wouldn't be able to actually argue against it. You would yield. Without understanding it, we cannot ever hope to prevent this ideology from raising furthermore into popularity, from raising its perception and corrupting our youth. I don't know how to emphasize this. If we don't understand fascism, we can never prevent it. That's how everything is. You need to understand something to fight against this. With this first video, I intend to create a collection of multiple videos that are meant to explain the different characteristics of fascism. However, these multiple series of videos aren't meant to be your definitive guide. By all means, technically and literally, I mean absolutely no position whatsoever to have the right to define this ideology. I do not have any academic qualifications, but even so, despite all of that, I would like to offer everyone this somewhat simple but detailed and understandable understanding of this ideology so that they can use me as the gateway in order to fully dive deeper towards the ideology. I want to be your gateway, not your source. So keep that in mind, that while the production quality of these videos will increase with each one, which means the research and thought put behind all of these videos, I still won't be your source. Just a disjointed guide. However, I need to tell you something. I need to confess something. I need to confess to you that all this time I've been lying to you. I have been telling you a horrible lie. I need to tell you the truth of the crime that I've been committing this entire time so far. I will expose myself. I have intentionally, wrongly represented and called the ideology of National Socialism fascism. So, the first step towards defining National Socialism is realizing that it was something special and unique. Not in a good way. National Socialism, to the extent which it had been actually put into practice, is something unseen beforehand. The first step to understanding this ideology is to recognize it for what it really is, not what it's loosely tied towards. The connection between fascism and National Socialism needs to be broken. I'm not saying they're not related. This is, well, let me put it this way. Say, they're both colors. Fascism is red, National Socialism is blue. Now, they are colors. Yes, they're both colors, but they're not the same thing. That's what the matters here. People are assuming that the loosely tied relation equates to them being the same ideologies. This now plays into my first point. Tell me, when you think about the phrase, what's fascism? Your mind will almost immediately jump towards World War II and the German Reich. If you know more, you might think about Italy and Mussolini too. But for most people, that's the image and connection that has been developed between the word fascism and the people. Whenever fascism is mentioned, people will immediately think about the German Reich and Adolf Hitler. But that is simply incorrect. It's incorrect within so many possible ways. This is the reason that I refuse to call it Nazism. One part is because of YouTube censorship, but otherwise it's because I know that then people will simply equate it with fascism. That's where I propose the first action to defining the ideology of National Socialism, my guide to National Socialism, separating it completely from fascism and realizing the fact that both National Socialism and fascism are two different and distinct ideas and ideologies that are only very, very loosely tied together. We need to stop acting like that these ideologies are all something that we can comfortably smash together and believe that's correct. We need to treat them separately. Fascism and National Socialism are ideologically opposed towards each other. These two ideologies are nowhere near as related that you might believe them to actually be. They're far further than the narrative that has been constructed around it. This narrative is that both of them are just part of the same ideology, that they're both, well, basically the same ideology. That's the narrative, because that's what people nowadays think about these two ideologies. But that's not true. Adolf Hitler and Mussolini were direct enemies for multiple years before the Pact of Steel came about, which was an alliance because of circumstances, not because of ideology. There are so many contradictions if you consider both National Socialism and Fascism the same ideology. There's so much contradictions between these two if you have that mindset. And you're gonna start noticing them. And then you won't be able to know what to think. Because the narrative is that they're the same thing. They're both fascist, of course. But it's not true. We need to stop thinking this. We need to look between these differences and separate these ideologies. I think that it's interesting to realize how this connection actually came to be, because it was one that was so wrong within reality that could actually be made that it's just questionable how it happened. Now, there's two reasons for this. I'm going to start with the first one. Naturally, within the Second World War, the Allies simply lumped the Italian fascists and German National Socialists together into just fascist. I think this makes perfect sense. There's nothing wrong with this from a level of understanding it. You can understand it. It makes sense why the Allied powers would do this. It's just basic things that happen within war propaganda. And because fascism was the more understood ideology, the ideology of Italy was more understood and known as opposed to National Socialism. However, well, this is correct. There's also another reason for this connection, and it's somewhat more interesting to say the least. The second reason, following the Second World War, communist historians, well, not all were communist, looked towards how they could plug the gap and create the link between fascism and National Socialism following this, since it only made logic after such a connection has been already established by wartime propaganda. After digging through the literal entirety of fascist doctrine, they found someone. Julius Evola, the village idiot of the Italian fascist. I am not making that up. Evola was absolutely anything but his counterparts. He was the exact link and gap that these historians needed to create the false perception between National Socialism and Fascism. He was that link. He was the linker. Now, you might question how someone so ideologically contradicting to Mussolini could stay within his circle. Well, occasionally, he needed help against the Catholic Church, against the Vatican. I know I just pronounced Catholic absolutely horribly. And he was more than excellent for that, since he had a lot of that anti-Catholic Church rhetoric in his, well, book. So, yes, really, other than wartime propaganda, that's the only natural connection that they could use. The literal village idiot of Italian fascism was used to create this artificial connection. Uh, it's kind of hard for me to record this segment because I was actually just kind of confused when I learned about this. Like, I was like, there's no way, but it's true. However, that tells you how much you just take it for. How much that argument and connection should be worth to you. Absolutely nothing. That's why we should break it finally, so we can get to understanding National Socialism truly. Really, it's that if we don't do this, we're never gonna get anywhere because we are not defining National Socialism. We are defining the National Socialism created by Twitter. Yeah. So really, what we learned today is that no, fascism and National Socialism are not the same thing. National Socialism is really a way of life. Eine Weltanschauung, a world perspective. I hope I can see you next time. I think this video turned out better than my last one. And in about a week's time, well, I'm actually not sure, but around in a week, the second episode of this, well, long series should come out. Take care, and remember, continue the fight against National Socialism.